I want to know that tweet that Z sent about the guy that did 1,200 drafts. So there's no
Yeah,
shot he's married. That's number one. Number two,
yeah,
how the
absolutely.
yeah, I mean he's well, if he is married, she filed for divorce. Um,
Yeah.
how the hell does somebody get 1,200 drafts in? And that's just underdog.
He's actually a really, really big fantasy golf guy too. He does everything with fantasy golf. So the guy's got to be just locked and loaded in his basement of his mother's house all the time.
But
Now
those are the
that poor
guys. If you're
bastard's
one of those
phone.
guys, we want you watching this show
Yes,
Absolutely.
that poor
in your mom's
bastard's phone's
basement.
probably dinging all night in your mom's basement.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Sports Ball. Tonight we have John, Michael, and Z. I'm your host, Kyle Head, and we're going to start off with some guys who we are avoiding in fantasy drafts this year. And Michael, a couple of guys in those first few rounds that we're avoiding, we have names like Kelsey, McCaffrey. Tell us a little bit about some of those guys we're avoiding.
Yeah, Kyle. So, the way we kind of looked at doing this was we need guys that are going to, outplay their ADP, be able to get in there and really do something different than they did last year. So we eliminated, I think it was about 25 guys, but the top three, Jamar Chase, Travis Kelce, Christian McCaffrey, were the top three guys that we eliminated from our draft board. And really, those guys are going to have great seasons, but are they going to do more than they've done the past 3 seasons? I think that when you look at McCaffrey, like, is he going to outplay what he did last season when he was traded to the 49ers? Is Kelsey going to do more than what he's done the past 2 seasons? He's going to be a great player, but is he going to be that guy that's going to get you over the hump in your fantasy league? And I think by eliminating these guys, because of where they're going with their ADP and not being able to get over that, be better, that hump of being better than what they were last season, we've decided to eliminate guys like that and really target guys that are out of the ordinary and going to outplay where people think that they're going to go in the draft.
Yeah, and I think that's a big key here. And guys, just jump in whenever you want. But another guy, a little bit down the board that we've been avoiding is Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence has got a lot of hype on him this year, and everybody thinks he's going to be a lot better, and he probably is, but I just don't think that where he moved up to, we haven't seen it yet, so we're kind of moving draft board and not taking him where he normally goes.
That's great stuff, Z. And, John, there's a few more guys that we haven't talked about in these first few rounds that, we think are going to have really good years, but maybe that ADP just doesn't match up with really what we're looking at.
Yeah, so I'll touch more on the back end of the first round. Like, we're avoiding Bijan, we're avoiding AJ Brown, we're avoiding Devontae Adams. Bijan, while there's so many carries available, draft him high, so they've got a lot invested. Tyler Algier just was so good last year. It's hard to believe that they just fully remove him, from the game plan. Stephon Diggs, we feel like there's some internal issues in Buffalo between the way last season ended and what we're seeing early on and hearing out of camp. And then AJ Brown. When you go back and look at the Eagles, passing, they were, while Jalen Hurts was incredible, they just didn't throw the ball a ton. And then from week 6 on, the Slim Reaper, Devonta Smith, was Jalen's go-to guy. So where AJ's getting drafted, we're just not all that into him. Devontae Adams is going to have quarterback questions all season. I just can't get behind investing that high of a pick in basically Jimmy Garoppolo. So we're passing on him. Believe it or not, we're actually passing on Mahomes at his ADP. It's just so tough to get him in any kind of combo unless you're really digging down the board to some of the Chiefs that we like. Hint, hint. Another guy that we're avoiding is Josh Jacobs. I know he's coming back and he's going to be ready for week 1, but what we've seen is these guys that miss camp, they tend to struggle. DK Metcalf, while great offense, they added JSN, who outperformed Garrett Wilson, and everybody forgets that, when they were at Ohio State together. Those are just a handful of the names that we're avoiding more toward the top end of drafts.
Yeah, and I think one thing with DK Metcalf, and we're talking about JSN, broke a bone in his hand. Don't really know the extent of it, but he's already back at practice. He's running routes. Pete Carroll said today that he's fielding punts, and he's looking great. He has a huge brace on his hand, but he's still going through things, and I've seen maybe week 5, week 6. I think he's back sooner than that. And even if he's week 2 or 3, I think he steps right in and really has a big impact on that offense. And when those bye weeks start coming around, I think he's a guy that really helps you. And, DK's been good. I just don't know if he can overperform. Tyler Lockett's another one that I think he's good. I think he can get you production, but he's just a guy that I don't know is going to overperform and go from, the 6th round to the 3rd round next year. But JSN could be one of those guys.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of the reason that we're avoiding DK and Tyler Lockett for that matter. We would just rather the cheapest of the players, of those skill players. Gamble on Charbonnet. We hate Kenneth Walker. We own literally none of him. So that means he'll probably lead the league in rushing with 2,500 yards and 17 touchdowns. But yeah, I'd rather just go cheap in that offense to be able to get a piece of it.
Yeah, and you talked about Bijan Robinson. I know, Z, I think you have a really good stat that you probably don't have in front of you, but it was with the Falcons and a guy like Tyler Algier that you can get later on the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that the Falcons are going to run the ball 500 times this year. They're not giving 500 carries to Bijan Robinson, the guy that they want to have for the next 4 and even longer years. So Algier is probably going to get 200 touches this year. So I'd rather have Algier than Bijan where he's going. I'll throw in a couple other guys while we're talking about this. Derrick Henry's an awesome football player. He's been good for a very long time, but he's getting old, and that team is not going to be great. And I'll tell you what, I've liked what I've seen from Tajay Spears and as their backup there. He looks great in preseason and maybe could step in, especially if they're not very good. And one more we're not taking around that same range is Najee Harris. Najee Harris, he's okay, but doesn't really do it for me. Jaylen Warren, though, looks really good. And again, another guy you can get super late and really pack the back end. So one of our strategies is to take some of the high running backs like Chubb and Eckler, and then pair those guys with some of these other backs that we think could eventually be the number one guy. Even Charbonnet, we think, could maybe steal a lot from Kenneth Walker as well.
Yeah, and Michael and I did a draft tonight, and we were in the same group in the room with a lot of guys, and some of these guys that we were drafting, none of these guys had heard of. Charbonnet, a guy beside me drafted Algier, and I was like, hey, great pick with Algier. And he looks over at me and he's like, it was? I was like, yeah, that's a great handcuff. I mean, he's going to get a ton of run. And if Bijan ever goes down, he's the number 1 for sure.
And in drafts like that, you also get questions with stuff like these ideas that we have and that we're trying to strategize with, like why we're passing up players, and then, trying to draw some of that interest to, why we're doing what we're doing and why we think it's the, way to, not really undervalue anybody, but just overvalue some of those, running back twos that you've been talking about. I think, there's a lot of these younger running backs that are backups to, guys like Derrick Henry and that do something different and that offer different things that are eventually going to set these guys apart.
Go ahead.
What you said when you're drafting guys and they're wondering like, hey, who is this? when we did our Sports Connection League, I drafted. So my starting quarterback is Dak Prescott. I drafted Jake Ferguson late just in case. I have Juwan Johnson, and I took Ferguson like as the combo. Everybody was breaking my stones because they're like, well, here's our first write-in on the draft board. Like he didn't even have a tag. You know what I mean?
Hey,
Kyle
the
took
guys that
Musk,
yeah, I did. I took Musgrave way over.
and no one knew he
Xavier.
wasn't even on. Like people were having to scroll down to find him.
That's
yeah,
great.
I have noticed he's going in the 13th or so round now, and we're getting him 17th round in those underdog drafts about a month ago.
I know. Oh man, I want to know that tweet that Z sent about the guy that did 1,200 drafts. So there's no shot
Yeah.
he's married. That's number one. Number two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean if he is married, she filed for divorce.
Yeah.
How the hell did somebody get 1,200 drafts in? And that's just underdog. Shit, this guy. Who knows what this guy's doing? Because he ain't just stopping there.
He's actually a really, really big fantasy golf guy too. He does everything with fantasy golf. So the guy's got to be just locked and loaded in his basement at his mother's house all the time.
Yeah, I mean those drafts take what 45 minutes. He had to have been doing 2 or 3 at a time.
But those are the
That
guys.
feels
If you're
bad.
one of those guys, we want you watching this show.
Absolutely.
That
In your mom's
phone's
basement.
probably dinging all night. In your mom's basement.
Yeah. We actually want you interacting on the Sports Vault. Ask us, answer them. So get over there on Discord and find it out. Find all that.
Yeah, if
He
you
might
ever have
not be able to.
questions-
He's probably got to click buttons the whole time. His whole life has been clicking buttons. The guy doesn't even have time to type a sentence. This poor bastard.
He's
how's he
probably an
gonna
online
shower?
poker guy too.
Yeah, he's got 15 monitors.
All right. Hey, John, I'm going to start with you, but kind of everybody can jump in with this. But what are some cheaper stacks that we're really liking this year?
Well, I just want to reiterate my man crush of the year, which means he'll be totally hampered with a pulled hamstring, probably like out of practice too. Like it won't be in practice, won't be in the game. He'll be jogging away from like Chick-fil-A and pull a hamstring. Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm just going to say it again. We have so much Jahmyr Gibbs. And then let me touch on my my man crush, my backup running back man crush, Jaylen Warren. I'm all about him. I think Najee is just really, really, really overrated. And Jalen running behind the same offensive Najee, he's just outperformed in so many key stats: explosive run rate, yards after contact. And I just think as the season goes on, a guy like Jaylen Warren, he's so cheap, especially in home leagues, like the non-online leagues. He's so cheap that he could be so valuable down the stretch for you. So I just really wanted to touch on those two guys.
Z, Michael, you guys have any good cheap stacks you like?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two. I'm going to give you the Saints. I think if you could stack Derek Carr with Olave and even Kamara. I know you missed Kamara for the first 3 weeks, but you can draft Jamal Williams a little bit later if you want to go that route. But I think you can throw Juwan Johnson in there too. Olave and Johnson could have a monster season. Carr likes to target the tight end. He had Darren Waller in Oakland or Las Vegas, both. And so I think you can do that. Another one I really like is the Denver Broncos. I think Sean Payton coming into Denver and taking over Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson looked awful last year, and who knows? I could be wrong, but I think Payton can do some magic with Russell Wilson. I absolutely love Cortland Sutton. His ADP is ridiculous. I think he should be as high as Judy is going, even before the injury, and he's going in the 90s. I think that's crazy. Draft Cortland Sutton, pair him with Javonte Williams in the backfield, and you've got yourself a solid stack there, I think, for pretty cheap.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in. I know we've had some discussions on this guy, but Marvin Mims, I think he's going to be okay. I
He could
think
be all
he's a
right,
guy
too.
Homer.
And he's
Yeah,
he's
it
starting
is,
to be
yeah.
talked about a lot.
Yeah, I can show my OU photos here in the room. So
I'm all over the Steelers this year. I mean, George Pickens is the first guy we're drafted in that stack. We've got Dante Johnson. You can get Freiermuth kind of cheap. Warren has the ability to catch balls out of the backfield. If you're in best ball leagues or you're even in like a local home league, man, I just think you give the Steelers a couple weeks and you're going to see a lot of explosive plays out of this team. They're opening up the offense. You've seen how great Kenny Pickett was in the preseason, and I get it was the preseason, but just to give you a couple quick stats, they were 32nd in explosive play rate last year. Explosive play rate is plays 15 yards or more. They only scored 2 touchdowns outside of the – think about that. Only 2 all season. That's really hard to do. So you get Kenny Pickett in year 2. You get George Pickens, who's an absolute stud. And I think the Steelers put you in a position to potentially win some best ball, weekly winter leagues, or just get better and better as the year goes on.
Yeah, and what's highly annoying is when somebody really likes George Pickens too, and he steals them right in front of you in a draft that you're in, like Michael did tonight. I did take Kenny Pickett, but he took Pickens in front of me. I wasn't very happy with that.
Who did? Michael did?
Well, it's also
He did.
yeah. It's also not good because we've done so much research on this that we kind of knew what the other one was thinking.
Yeah, I was making money calling out his picks.
Oh my God, that's great. I think Kneebone in our Sports Connection League, I think he purposely skipped Gibbs and let him fall to me. I was 2 after Kneebone. I think Kneebone knew he'd get thrown out of the sports vault if he took me.
I did that with JSN. Didn't draft him knowing that you were going to try to go get him.
I did, and I got him.
There's only a few people that can mess with the boss, right, Hollywood?
Wow.
I will say I did start in that league. I started Jefferson with the 2 because guy at 1 picked Mahomes, and then on the backside I got CeeDee Lamb. So
What?
yeah.
Is this a real money league, Kyle? You playing for $2 or for more?
Well, a little more than $2. We are all coaches, so.
Okay.
Actually, I don't think I
Okay,
can
so
say
I
that
have
on
a
air.
stack that I've liked, and I really think I'll call it a sleeper stack. I don't know if everyone here will like it, but we talked about Musgrave. I really think that, and we've drafted Jordan Love quite a bit, like as the second quarterback in best ball leagues, and I think just having him to take a chance, you stack him. We were able to get Musgrave late a lot of times, and really late early, and you stack that with Watson, and sometimes you can get Dowds. You have a good chance of, if something pops at some point, it's going to be a good week for you. And they're going to throw it.
I love
Yeah,
that, by
John,
the way.
just to kind of wrap us up tonight, talk a little bit about the explosive plays, and teams that are really good have some big explosive plays.
Yeah, so let me read you a really cool stat. So last year, the 8 most explosive offenses in 2022: the Bills, the Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Seahawks, 49ers, Eagles, Jaguars, Vikings. That's a lot of teams that made the playoffs. Okay. And just to give you an example of how important it is, in 2021, the Rams were number 3 in explosive plays. So the Steelers and the Ravens, to me, are the 2 most intriguing. Ravens going to a wide open offense, which I think is going to give a lot of value to the receivers. Zay Flowers is a guy we've been loading up on. I mean, Bateman's cheap too. Like the whole Ravens stack is just so cheap. Dobbins is cheap. They're all really cheap. It's a great team to build around in any draft that you do. Another team that I think can move up the ladder in explosive play rate is, this is going to be a bet for me in week 1, is the Washington Commanders. I think the combination of the enemy and Sam Howell being really good. Shout out to my guy, Sean King. Let's see who remembers Sean King, former Tulane and Tampa Bay Bucks quarterback. This guy is unbelievable evaluating quarterbacks. He's been in love with Sam Howell. So I really trust Sean and I really respect his opinion. So I took his information, I loaded up on Sam Howell's cards, and we're extremely overweight Jahan Dotson. Dude is an absolute monster, flying under the radar, and is going to have a huge season. So I think the Commanders with that defense and just a more open offense.
Z, do you remember how many the guy with the 1,200 drafts and Underdog, what his percentage of shares on Sam Howell was?
Yeah, his Sam Howell percentage was 0%, I believe. 0. Absolutely 0.
Drafts.
So he's basically just burning up hundreds, which we like to do around here sometimes too.
All right, well, I think that's going to do it for us tonight here on the Sports Vault. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, follow us on Discord, ask questions, be interactive. We're going to be jumping on there, and good luck in any of your drafts this weekend. If you have any questions, we're going to be posting our rankings in there so you can jump on there and steal some of these guys late in your drafts. So, John, Michael, Z, thanks for being on with us. I'm Kyle Head. We'll talk to you next time on the Sports Vault. See ya.